Welcome and thank you for joining us today as we have a little conversation together as friends about the upcoming holidays, whenever you might be watching this, and how you incorporate that all into your homeschooling schedule. And so we've titled this conversation Holiday School. My name is Judy Winnuck. I am Sonlight Marketing Sales Manager. I'm also a retired veteran homeschool mom of three amazing people who are all now grown. And I have the privilege of working often with these two lovely ladies that are with me. Lisa, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me today. I'm Lisa. I am a retired homeschool mom. My youngest graduated last year, is in her first year of college. My other two are married and out of the house. So my husband and I are in a new season of life, the empty nest situation, just us and the cats. But I am excited to be here and talk about really one of my favorite times of the year and one of my most favorite things about being a homeschool family, because you get to do what we're going to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Judy, it's so good to be here. I too am a veteran retired homeschool mom of three kids. They are all grown and launched pretty much. My youngest is still in nursing school, but the other two are out and working in the world. And I do also love to encourage new homeschool families with just how to begin and how to continue and how to persevere and how to make it fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. What do we mean when we say holiday school? What's it mean to you guys?
For us, it was the week of Thanksgiving, putting our Sonlight away on the shelf until the new year and getting out new things, working on new things together that helped our family remember the reason for not only Thanksgiving, because we like to incorporate that as well, but then in the days leading up to Christmas, why we're celebrating the greatest gift ever. It was a way for us to anticipate that gift coming.
Thank you.
For our family, it was a little bit different. We did not stop doing Sonlight at Thanksgiving. We continued. I had done some backwards math. I knew when I wanted to end my school year, and I knew we wanted to take a break for the Christmas season in particular. So we would typically stop somewhere around when the public school system stopped and take about a 3-week break. But I did incorporate some extra things to our homeschool, and we lightened our load a little bit by eliminating some of those extras that I was doing. I eliminated those extras in order to add new extras.
Great. Well, I think maybe Lisa summed it up really well, and that is homeschooling gives you that flexibility, especially when it comes to holiday times, to bend or flex your schedule, to kind of incorporate all that's going on into your schedule. So let's talk maybe specifically, more practically, about how you flex your schedule if you do what Lisa did, or I did kind of a variation of what you did, Lisa. So maybe you could talk a little more specifically about how you made that work. Did you just not catch up on all that other stuff you set aside, or how did you do that?
So in the time leading up to Thanksgiving, if we were doing a read aloud, I kind of did the math. This is the day we want to stop. Do we need to read a few extra pages as we come up to that? Because I did not want to stop for 6 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it turned out to be, in the middle of a book. So readers, read alouds, if we were reading a history novel, all of those things, we did some calculating and found out on that Friday we wanted to finish every story. We just stopped there in our instructor's guide, and that was just the next day that we picked up when we started back to school after the new year. So we didn't skip anything. We just allowed for a break. Math was the same. We tried to make sure we maybe did a unit test or a lesson test, whatever kind of math program we used. Science was pretty easy to stop in the younger years, especially because you're just kind of reading along. So that was how we did it. We just kind of purposefully wound the plane down to that Friday before the week of Thanksgiving, tying up all the loose ends. And if we finished to read aloud on Tuesday, because that's how the schedule went, well, that just gave us extra time to finish up something else. So even that week before may have been a little different than regular weeks.
So we did kind of a variation on that. We stopped some things and some things we did not. So we carried math and phonics through. I did not set those aside. So when the children were younger, it was phonics. When they were older, it was their readers. And we did a math lesson every day, but everything else got adjusted or got adapted. And we did similarly to what you did. We ended at a good ending point, and we just picked up there again when the holidays were over and it was time to pick up our history and our read alouds and readers. And so, yeah, maybe a little variation on what you did. Sheila, talk about how you adapted your schedule.
So I was already doing a block schedule anyway. So we would do two days of history and 2 days of science. So we did continue doing that. We would eliminate, like I remember we had done, one year we were doing the story of the orchestra, and one year we did some art appreciation, or we had done artistic pursuits, things like that, like elective type things. And so we stopped doing those and then replaced that time slot with some Christmassy type of activities that we'll talk about shortly.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, hopefully that gives people, a little more practical approach to thinking through how they might pull off holiday school. Because I know one of the biggest questions everybody has is, yeah, but what about all that stuff we skipped? Well, you're not really skipping it. And so hopefully that puts your mind at rest. So let's talk about how you can still teach things like science and math and literature, even if you're not doing what Sonlight has scheduled for those weeks. How do you incorporate those subjects into a holiday school or holiday studies? Any ideas or thoughts?
One of the things we did was we did set aside the read aloud that was in the Sonlight instructor's guide, and we could read those books during the summertime, or we would just read faster. Instead of reading a chapter a day, we would read multiple chapters a day, because my kids love to be read to. I would let them play with Legos, and so for them it didn't feel like work. So it was easy to be able to pick those up at a later date and add them in, especially in the younger years when the read aloud does not tie in with the history. It was fine to just read those books in June when we were not doing school. And so I would replace those books, the read aloud book, with a collection that we had of Christmas books. I would also scour our library for some extra Christmas stories. You had to get those kind of early because sometimes public school teachers would check them out. So just kind of giving you a heads up with that. And you can't, our library, you can only check out for 3 weeks, but if people put a hold on it, then you would have to pay a fine. So you have to kind of be careful with that. So I would save our personal books for when we ran out of library books, and we would always start with the library book first. So we did literature that way. And for Bible, we did a Bible, an Advent reading program that we had. And so we might replace our Bible reading with an Advent Bible reading.
And speaking of Advent, Sonlight has an Advent unit study, and I'm guessing Sheila has it right there at her fingertips.
I happen to have one. This is the one that goes with the Jotham book. So we discovered these books many years ago before Sonlight had them. And this is the first book that Sonlight has an Advent study to tie in with. And this was a trick we did. We would write down on the inside the years that we would read the book, because it it did become a trilogy. When we first started it, it was just the one. And then the author added more books. And so we first started this book in 2001. That was our first year reading it. And then we read it again in 04 and then 07. And then I loaned it to my brother and his family in 2014. So I started writing their dates in the book as well. So that's kind of fun if you want to track. But the Advent kit comes with the book, which is great, but it also comes with a schedule with all these things that we're talking about. So it has a Bible reading program with a few questions to be able to discuss the Bible passage. It has some fun crafts with everything supplied. I mean, the most basic things you may have to provide, like markers or something, but those little doodads that you need to be able to complete the craft program, Sonlight provides. And then we have also some yummy recipes that we've included that are from tried and true recipes that we have used ourselves. And so it's just a really fun way to add some special Christmas Jesus-focused things. Even the crafts, we've tried to steer away from more secular type of crafts and have them be a little bit more meaningful. So really fun things, and that would be a really great way. I wish this was around when we were doing Christmas school, but it's available to you now, so we highly recommend it. We came out with a new one this year as well, and it is focused on, I have it, here it is, Not Buried. It's focused on the second book, which is Tabitha's Travels. So all new crafts, all new recipes, and a whole new schedule for this particular book.
Very exciting. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
So Lisa, what kinds of things did you traditionally do with your family?
So Sheila told me about the Jotham's Journey book. So we also did those, but we did that not during school. We did that after dinner time as a family. But one year, I think if my kids were here, they would say one of their most favorite years, we read A Christmas Carol. Just like a Sonlight book, we read some pages a day. And then at the end, we rented or streamed or whatever we could do every version of A Christmas Carol movie and compared them in true Sonlight fashion. We compared and contrasted to find out which one of the versions most closely followed the book. And our results were very surprising. You know, there's the black and white, there's the Bill Murray, there's even a Muppet version. And so we had done that as a family, watched, I think we took like a Friday night and all day Saturday to watch all the movies that we could. And then we did a little comparison and came up with the one that we thought was the best. So I highly recommend it.
That most closely held to the book, right?
The movie that most closely followed the text of the book, and it was not what we anticipated.
And we're not going to tell you because we
No,
want
you
you all to
should
try it.
definitely go through and do that.
That would be a fun holiday school project for sure. We did a lot of things with baking. Baking is a passion of mine. And so it's amazing if you stop and think about baking from a scientific and a mathematical point of view. We did a lot of school during holiday school because we, as a family, we put together little holiday packages of baked goods to take to our neighbors. So we multiplied recipes. We did, some fun things for other family members. And so we talked about how much of each ingredient we needed to buy at the store. We set up a little budget to figure out how much it was going to cost us. And so there are just lots and lots of ways to do that. You can make candy and talk about, the temperature that you have to get a sugar and water base to come to before it candies. And you can talk about the science of tempering chocolate and lots of fun things that you can do that way too. And in the end, after you're all done learning all that math and science, you have yummy things to eat. And so that's always a fun way to incorporate some holiday focused things into your school year in those months surrounding the holidays. And it doesn't have to be limited just to Christmas either. We were talking earlier about some fun ways that you can incorporate just the season of fall or autumn and Thanksgiving. And so we'll talk about those in just a minute here, but let's move on and talk a little bit about specific ways, maybe give people some ideas on how you can help your children, your family, focus on giving, whether it's around Thanksgiving or around Christmas. But during that holiday season, what were some of the traditions that you guys had to help your family focus on the reason for this whole holiday celebration?
Well, we had a tradition that a friend brought to us that we adopted and just loved. We ended up really falling in love with this. And we called it the 12 Days of Christmas. We actually called it Secret Santa, although it has nothing to do with a Santa Claus. It really focuses on the 12 Days of Christmas song. And it includes each day of the 12 days, there's a little poem that you will print. There are certain things that you purchase that will go along with the poem. For example, for the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. And then the poem is based on the partridge in the pear tree. And it has a humorous, well, partridges are hard to find, so I got you a can of pears. And so then you give them a can of pears. And you tie the poem to the gift. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could do that. You could gift wrap it. We just did lunch bags, and we would put the gift in there, and then I could label 1 through 12, and I would prep everything ahead of time, and then we could just grab it. And then you pick someone who lives not too far from you, because you're going to visit this family for 12 days. So we would pick someone in our neighborhood who was either alone, like they were a single person. We picked several people that we knew who were single parents and their child had gone away to college. So it was their first year alone. We did that at least two times that I can recall. And then you ring and run. Now, in this day and age, it may be a little hard to ring and run because everyone has a camera on there. So you may have to get creative with that on how you're going to do that. Maybe, put a bag over your head or something, but you want to remain anonymous. And so you leave the gift. And like I said, I have boy, girl. And so they would dress up in black clothes. They would be ninjas. And it would be so exciting. We would pull up and leave the van on with the lights off, and the kids would run, get out and run up to the door and drop the gift and ring, and then go, mom, go. And we would, take off, and it was so fun. But in the very first day, when you do it, the poem does say something like, you're going to be visited by some elves, or I don't know if it says elves, but you're going to be visited. Please join in the fun and don't try to figure out who we are. We'll let you know in the end. And that way they are expecting, to have a doorbell ring every night. We would do it under the cover of darkness. And then in the end, you actually don't reveal who you are, because it is more blessed to give than to receive, and don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. So you actually remain secret, but they buy in because you let them know that, don't ruin the fun by trying to figure out who we are. And it was just so fun. And so we would spend time figuring out who we were going to pick this year. And then we would have fun shopping for the items. So it was such a fun way to do it. We did it all the way through high school. Like even my high schoolers wanted to play. So
that is so cool.
It's so fun.
I wish you had told me about that when my kids were still at home.
I'm sorry. You have grandkids you can do it with them.
I do. So maybe we can start a new tradition with them. That's very exciting. And by the way, we will provide the instructions for that fun tradition once this video is over. So Lisa, what about you guys?
We often would host a birthday party for Jesus. I have girls, so tea party, that was always fun. We used math because we budgeted, and some years we asked our guests to bring diapers for the women's shelter or canned goods for the food pantry. And then some years I had pre-made like sugar cookies, and we decorated them and took them to the fire department or to police or to the nursing home. But we tried, it was fun for my kids because they got to see their friends, and we got to work on something together. And it was a great way to focus on something else. We didn't do the Secret Santa or any of that where they brought a gift for each other, but we wanted to make sure that we were focusing just a little bit on others. We often had the birthday cake for Jesus that started with a dark chocolate layer showing that we were all sinners. And then we put red icing on that to show Jesus' blood. And then a green layer on top of that to show our new life. White icing because Jesus was pure. And we always put one candle to show that Jesus was the light of the world. And we sang happy birthday to Jesus. So that was fun. We didn't do it the same way every year, but lots of ways that we could not only have our family giving, but enlist friends. So we generally would have a birthday party for Jesus that focused on others.
It sounds like fun. We, like I mentioned before, used to put together little goodie bags for the neighborhood, and we use those brown paper lunch bags that Sheila referred to, and I let my kids decorate them every year. So some years we used cookie cutters that we traced around, and other years we added bows and just lots of fun things that they were able to do. And then together we worked on a menu. So what 3 things are we going to put in the bag this year? And then we made them and bagged them all up. And we didn't go under cover of darkness or ring and run, but we did have fun driving to their houses and just knocking on the door. And the kids each got a chance to hand over a gift and say Merry Christmas. And it was an awesome way for us to be able to let our neighbors know who we were. We live in a rural area, and so we don't see our neighbors a whole lot. And so that was kind of fun. And sometimes we would be involved in a church program for Christmas. And so the church may have printed a little invitation kind of thing that we would tuck in the bag. So lots of fun ways you can build tradition into a giving spirit during your holiday school. And just worth noting, I think, you don't always have to spend money to do that either. There are ways to give of yourself. Time is very valuable. And while it may not cost you cash money, it does cost you the sacrifice of some time. But there are lots of ways to be able to do that. Do you guys have any thoughts or ideas on how your family maybe gave a gift of time some years?
One of the things we did do one year, we actually did it in conjunction with the youth group when the kids were a little bit older, but I loved it and I thought that was a great idea. In Florida, which is where we live, the leaves don't fall till like Christmas. Like we don't get fall in October like the rest of the world. So we would go around and rake people's yards, especially older people or single people, widows, that kind of thing. And we would do a raking, we would rake up and do some yard work kind of thing. We would also offer to decorate if people wanted to put out lights or something like that. We would offer to decorate the outside of their homes and have the kids help with some of that type of stuff, like a service project kind of a thing.
Sure.
When my kids were a bit older, my parents were not well. And that was something my mom was really big on, was decorating She was really sad the first year that she was sick that she wasn't going to have a tree. She didn't know what she would do. So one Saturday morning, we always decorate the Friday after Thanksgiving. That was my childhood growing up, and that's when we do it. So that Saturday, I told my kids, I got them up early. I said, put on Christmas clothes. We're going to ride over to grandma's and surprise her, because she had resigned herself to no Christmas in her house because neither one of them were well enough to do it. So we went over, we went out in the shed, we got all the things in, we decorated her house, her yard, all the things that she would have done. And she was so happy, but then she said, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to take all this down. And like, it ruined the day for her because now she was overwhelmed with what was she gonna do. So we assured her that we would be back, no worries. So we went back and took down everything, which to me is the most horrible part of Christmas ever. I would decorate 4,000 times more than I do now if I didn't have to put it away. But we did go back and take it down as well. So that was 2 Saturdays that we gave up our whole day just to be of service. And then until they passed away, we continued that tradition of decorating our house and then getting up the next day and getting our Christmas music and our Christmas clothes and going over and doing their house as well.
What a wonderful memory. So let's move on and talk a little bit about keeping that literature-based focus for the holidays. I mean, it just seems like the holidays lend themselves to reading. So talk to me a little bit about what some of your favorite books were that you pulled out only at holiday time, and not just Christmas, fall and Thanksgiving and all during that holiday season. What did you guys read?
Well, I have a little pile of our favorites. I have the same story, just one says a board book for little kids and one says a little bit older. This is The Pumpkin Gospel. So it's great for fall. It tells the story of how we are like a pumpkin. We are dirty and in the yuck, just like a pumpkin, and Jesus comes and picks us up and he cleans us out. He takes all that gooey, gunky, it's the worst part of a pumpkin is cleaning out the inside. But he does all of that, and then he puts his light inside of us so that we can shine brightly for people. So I've used these books not only with my own kids, but with kids that come in. Sheila will tell you I'm kind of a kid magnet. If you need to ditch your kids for a little bit, they're always welcome at my house. So I have shared these 2 books with countless children. And it's a great way to simply explain to them the good thing that Jesus does for us. We are like those pumpkins. So those are my favorite fall books. And then this is a book we were gifted. It's Squanto and the Miracle of Thanksgiving. And it is a little biography of Squanto and how God used the hard that was in Squanto's life. His village was destroyed. He was taken over to England as a slave, but God used all of that in Squanto's life, and he redeemed all of the hard. So we always read that at Thanksgiving dinner. And then 2 of my favorite Christmas books, The Tale of 3 Trees, talks about one tree that was made into a manger, one that was made into a cross. That was the last one. And I can't remember what a boat that Jesus was in. And then the crippled lamb, who everyone has made fun of his whole life. But because he can't join the other lambs in the field, he has to stay behind and he gets to be there when Jesus is born. I can't ever read it without crying because it's
Don't get me started.
so sweet. And then one of our favorite fun books, if you give a moose a muffin or a mouse a cookie, this is if you take a mouse to the movies, and he's going to the movie on Christmas Day. So it's not a Jesus book, but it's one of our favorites. We usually would read it after all the presents and all the things. So some of my favorites.
Love those titles. How about you, Sheila?
I have a few books too. I already shared the Jotham books with you, so you already know about those. And these were actually, well, one was a gift and one I bought, but this one is called The Year of the Perfect Christmas Tree. And I'm not going to give you a book report. You can just check it out yourself if you like it, but that's one of my favorites. And then The Christmas Miracle of Jonathan Toomey is another. I can't read this one without crying. I cry very easily, and so there are lots of Sonlight books that I would cry at, and my kids would always be like, "Mommy, are you crying?" Yes, I am. Yeah, so I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed to cry. So that book made me cry. I do have several others, but I only pulled two off the shelf. Those are my two favorites that I own. But like I said, we would go to the library because I love the library. I love using the library, and I love that it's free and I get to come home with stacks of books. Right now I have stacks of cookbooks in my kitchen because they're free. And so yeah, we would bring books home, and some were better than others. So we would just read what the library had and then return them all and pull our books off.
Well, I too have a little stack of books here. These are some that we collected over the years. One of our favorite Thanksgiving books is called Cranberry Thanksgiving. And it's a wonderful story by the Devlins, a husband and wife team. And so you got to check it out because the illustrations are gorgeous. And I have a couple of Christmas stories that are older. And one of the things that I found was sometimes digging around in that library, which I also love to visit, you'll find stories that were written long, long ago that kids are not familiar with because nobody's made a cartoon movie out of it or whatever. And so sometimes it's fun to find those Christmas stories that maybe you grew up with as a child, but your kids have never heard of. So one of those is the story of Holly and Ivy. This was one of our favorite books at Christmas time by Rumer Godden, and I highly recommend that story. And then if you're not familiar with the author Tasha Tudor, you should be. And one of her Christmas books is called Becky's Christmas. And that's always been a favorite of ours. But the fun thing is that all the illustrations are done in black and white. And so it really is an older book. But if your library has some older titles, try them out because you never know. You might find a new favorite that your kids have never heard of before. So lots of fun books to look for at Christmas time. So let's talk just briefly here about how you prevent the exhausted, burned out mom on Christmas morning who has run here and there and done the shopping and the baking and the wrapping and all the things that have to happen for Christmas. How can we turn this into a family project during holiday school instead of a mom project? What do you think?
Well, one of the things that I recommend is not doing it all. You can't do everything. So it's a good idea to get the family together, the kids, even the husband, and maybe brainstorm a list of things that they would like to do and just write it all down, make a list, and then maybe have each child pick one. Like, it's not Christmas if we don't go see Christmas lights and drink hot chocolate, etc. Or it's not Christmas if we don't go see the latest Christmas movie, or, whatever it is. Just have each child and each person, because you count too. You get to also pick a tradition that you want to do. So make a list of all the things, figure out where they will fit on your calendar, and then don't do any of the other things. Like, just say it's okay to not do it all. If you get overwhelmed at the idea of baking Christmas cookies and doing sugar, you got to roll them out and you cut them and then they bake. I mean, that is an all day thing and it makes a huge mess. And if you don't like the sprinkles, it's okay. You don't have to make sugar cookies. That's not the end of the world. But if you're like Judy, who loves to bake, like, that may be super, super important. And she lives way up north where it's cold and snowy, and she may not want to leave the house and go look at Christmas lights because she might get stuck in, whatever. So you get my point. Like, name what matters to you and to your family and just do those things and let everything else go. I think we feel so pressured in having the Pinterest perfect Christmas, and we know that moms are the ones that make it happen. And then Christmas morning, you are burnt out and crying in a heap because you're exhausted and, it's over in a flash. So that's my first thing, is to figure out what really matters to you, put it on the calendar, and don't feel bad about the rest. But then also include your family. So if you are going to, if you want your house to be clean, so that when you put up the Christmas tree, you got to move the couch and you find stuff under the couch that you haven't moved all year. Oh, there's the missing Lego piece that I've been looking for, whatever, so include your kids in the house cleaning and the prepping, in the planning and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be my biggest thing. And same with menu. I am a big food person. So I'm not a baker. I'm a cooker. I'm a, food. So to me, food is important. And so I have to limit I want to do all the new recipes. I want to try all the new things. And so I have to limit myself to a few family favorites and maybe one, maybe two new things. And that's it. But I have to get buy-in from my family. They do help.
Yeah, I think it's important for all of the things for kids to do. The wrapping, the cleaning, the cooking, the shopping. That was why we paused school, was so that each day we could focus on some part of that. Whether it was the kids decorating brown paper to be wrapping paper for that year with stamps or drawings or whatever that turned out to be, or making your grocery list, and shopping when not everyone was there. Don't go to the grocery store on the Saturday before Christmas. That's bad news. So we tried to shop early while everyone else was still at school. So that kind of thing, that was why we put our school aside, was so that we did have time. It was a time that we focused on deep cleaning our house because we were moving furniture to accommodate the Christmas tree, or there was going to be a focus on that corner where the tree was, where we hadn't cleaned all year. So we did incorporate that into our school. Not every single thing is fun, but we could make it fun. We could put on Christmas music. We could have hot chocolate. We could wear our Christmas shirt, all of those things, and work together, and it could be fun. So
Lisa's girls were big on crafts, and they would make their own Christmas cards and paper. Yes. I mean, they were amazing. They did all kinds of stuff. So
yes. So we did make Christmas cards. That was a day's craft project. We just kind of, because we had the time, we set aside, okay, we're going to do this and this and this. But we did do, like Sheila said, we made a bucket list for Christmas, and everybody got their input. And then, even if you didn't want to go get Christmas lights, but your sister did, well, get your pajamas on, grab your favorite Christmas mug, and let's get in the car and look at the Christmas lights, because your sister will go along with whatever it is that you chose joyfully as well. So for sure.
And I think one of the things that we did was we started looking at the holidays coming up in advance. And so I'm another one like Lisa. I love that time of year. And so I don't want it all to end in 2 weeks. And so I would back it up, and we would start that focus, because I live in the cold and snowy north. We would start that focus back in October, when all those leaves were falling and the apples were ready to come off the trees. And so we would, as a family, make our own applesauce or apple butter. Sometimes we made applesauce ornaments and decorated those and set them aside, because we knew that we were going to give them as gifts in December. Sometimes we made jars of applesauce for families who didn't have the wherewithal or the time or the opportunity to make applesauce. And so it's canned and it's sealed and it's good for months. And so we set it aside, and we had it available in December when it was time to give. So we like to stretch out our preparations a little bit and do some of those fun things ahead of time, even while we were still doing regular school as opposed to holiday school. We began getting into that holiday spirit maybe a little bit earlier than other folks, simply because of where we lived and knowing that some of those things were available to us then. And Thanksgiving was another really big holiday for us from the standpoint of we had the opportunity to do that baking that I loved and taught my kids to love. And so lots of ways that you can incorporate preparation for this into your family schedule for sure. Wow, lots of great ideas for holiday school and getting your family involved, especially. So let's backpedal just a little bit and step back. And as we wrap this up, our conversation here, let's talk a little bit about stopping in the midst of all the busyness, finding a way to keep our focus where it needs to be. Any thoughts or practical tips on how we can make sure we don't lose that focus?
Well, for our family, Sheila was talking about they switched up their Bible to an Advent plan. We tried to read through the book of Luke. Conveniently, God put 24 chapters in the book of Luke, and there's 24 days in December before Christmas. And you could spend those 24 days just reading one chapter a day together and really getting to know Jesus, the person whose birth you're anticipating. So that was just a way for our family to refocus each evening together, to know that we were going to read about that. I had often read the same chapter that morning myself in my own quiet time. But just revisiting those familiar stories is just so cool when you're looking toward the birth of Jesus. It just puts it in a different perspective, and it does keep that focus on what it truly needs to be. We're not celebrating people with pointy ears and striped pantyhose. You know, we really are, as people of the kingdom of God, waiting with anticipation for the birth of Jesus. And it reminds us that we're waiting for him to come back again. And so that was always something that we looked forward to as a family, reading through that.
Well, we are of the Anglican tradition. So Advent is a season of the church, and our entire church celebrated Advent. At church, we had an Advent wreath that with the candles, and they would light it every Sunday. And we had that also at home. So we have an Advent wreath, and we would light our candles. We would do our Jotham book in relation to that. Like, you know, we would light our candles and do the Jotham book. I also very early on, I think Tommy was a baby when I purchased at a craft fair a large wooden nativity scene. And it always went out in a very prominent place. I have a sofa table in my living room, and so I would strip it of everything else, and the nativity would be there. And it's wooden, so the kids were allowed to play with it. I mean, they're like blocks. So they were allowed to play with it. It wasn't one of these like pretty but super expensive and you can't touch it, you know. But I have friends who did have one of those, but they also had a Playmobil nativity scene so that the kids could sit and play with that, and they would put that under the Christmas tree with no gifts, just that toy play nativity scene. And you can let them, you know, act out the story that you are reading. Like Lisa said, as she's reading through the book of Luke, then they can play with the little characters and they can tell the story over and over again. So that was another thing that we would do, is just to really focus on, it's not just the gift giving, it's not just the tree, but it is all about Jesus. And we did try to keep that focus. And also for myself, I would wake up in the morning, I would make sure that I had my quiet time in the morning and that I could focus on my relationship with Christ.
Excellent. I think one of the things that I started doing when our children were young was making sure that we had purposeful conversations about what we were celebrating. And it started at Thanksgiving. For example, when we sat down to our Thanksgiving dinner, before we dug in to feed our appetites and stuff our faces with all the wonderful things on the table, we stopped and talked about what Thanksgiving means. And we talked about, went around the table and each person shared something that they were thankful for. Some years we said, okay, look at the person across the table from you and tell one thing that you're thankful for about them. And so we just looked for different ways to change it up, but it was purposeful. And we did the same thing at Christmas time when we sat down and had Christmas breakfast together. My husband would read the story from Luke, and then we would talk about, what that all meant and what it meant for us. And so just look for natural, unscheduled ways to have purposeful conversations about the season. And that requires stopping and putting down the house cleaning tools and setting aside the gift wrapping and just stopping and pausing to put our focus back where it belongs, pretty much. Well, ladies, we've used up our time. Again, it's been a treat and a joy to have conversation with you about a holiday tradition that we all love in different aspects. And so I thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully those who listen have been encouraged by what we've shared. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.